Okay, I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year to all. This has been another difficult holiday season. Thank you, COVID. But I hope each of you has had time for rest and renewal over the holidays. We're starting this new year in a work from home capacity again, but I'm delighted that we are able to continue with our weekly grand rounds, and very thankful to our guest speaker this morning for kicking off our 2022 Grand Round series. Dr. Consolado Sergi will introduce our speaker this morning, but I would like to first begin with our land acknowledgement to remind us that Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them and this land. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. CHEO also honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past, present, and future contributions to this land. And now I will hand it over to Dr. Sergey.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour. I'm very pleased to make the introduction to Joseph Feulefack. Dr. Feulefack is originally from Cameroon with degrees obtained from in Germany, and he has epidemiology and statistics background. He can speak fluently French and English. If you consider opportune at the end of the presentation, if you want to make any questions in French, you feel free to speak French. He is has been involved many projects, and with me and my group is one of my best fellow of my group. And I was involved originally with Lyon, France, with IARC and WHO, with the pesticides, and I've been practically behind the decision that probably you know about the glyphosate, that glyphosate is linked to cancer, and we published in Lancet Oncology a few years ago, and then developed an practically cascade of publications correlated to pesticides and cancer. Mostly in adults, but we concentrated also in kids, and today Joseph will present some data about parental pesticide exposure and childhood brain tumors. I'm very pleased to give the word to Joseph to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sergi, for giving me the floor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to present this work on behalf of my other co-authors, Dr. Isaac Khan and Dr. Forestier. Welcome to you who are attending this presentation. It is about parental pesticide exposure. And we all know cancer is one of the most important cause of childhood death in developed countries. And most especially, malignant brain tumors are the second most common cancer in pediatric age. The problem is pesticides, although play a strong role in etiology of childhood brain tumor, the results remain conflicting in the literature. And when we say pesticide, we are talking about substances that can cause harm to people, and that are mitigated through, that are repelled through, that are used to repel pests. And most especially when children get exposed to pesticides, they run the risk of having the cancer. For instance, when parents go out and come back home, for instance, with dust on their shoes, if the children somehow breathe or are in contact or swallow those toxic substances, they run the risk of getting the cancer. Our main aim in this research, in this systematic review, is to examine, to check whether there is an association between pesticides, those toxic substances, and childhood brain tumor. If there is an association, especially when we are exposed through occasional pesticides, or when we are exposed through occupational pesticide, or when we are exposed through when you are exposed to occupational pesticide exposure, or when we are exposed before conception, at preconception. If at preconception we are exposed to pesticides, does that cause childhood brain tumor? If you are exposed after birth, does that cause cancer? If we are exposed in our residence, or when we use chemical products in the residence or in the household, are we likely to get cancer? What does the literature say about it when we do this analysis from the perspective of PRISMA methodology? So we want to make out whether occupational exposure can cause cancer, childhood brain tumor. We want to know when that is possible: after birth, before birth, or during residential exposure. We gathered the literature from 1966, the time frame from 1966 to December 2020. We consider studies that of patients that are less than 24 years from the literature. So the paper is selected, take that into account. We only, and this is important, we only consider case control studies, and we use the Newcastle-Ottawa scale to score the studies that are included in the research, in the systematic review. The software we are going to consider that we use to make this analysis, to conduct the analysis, was the comprehensive meta-analysis software. And again, our aim is to check whether there's an association between pesticide exposure and the disease cancer before birth, after birth, through occupation, and when the contact is within the residence. We've said we follow the reporting item for systematic review, that is PRIMA, and roughly we do a systematic literature review, research we're using keywords like pesticide, fungicide, childhood, and so on. We inputted those keywords in the various search engines, and we departed from 55 articles, and out of those articles, we finally obtained 28 after excluding some owing to language restrictions or relevance restrictions. So the studies selected, we've said 28, and the data we extracted from those studies are, for instance, if you check this table, these are the first columns are some of the studies, some of this is just a snapshot of some of the entire study. This some you have the studies on the first column, and we consider the source and time of exposure, the effect size, which is the odd ratio, and other variables. Let me just consider this first study by Quitigen. In this study, there is a control experiment. So based on you have a group exposed to insecticides, which is one category of pesticides, and the odd ratios from the experiment was 1.2. The lower limit of the confidence interval, or 95% confidence interval, was 0.7, and the upper limit is 1.9. So 133 cases of 23 participants were exposed to insecticides, and the control group. In the control group, you all have the same number of 163, and within the exposed group, the treatment group, you had 38 cases, and within the control group, you had 33. So these are the kind of data we extracted from different from the 28 papers selected. Yes, this table is still similar. Is still showing the kind of data we extracted and inputted in the comprehensive meta-analysis software to do the analysis. And we just mentioned insecticides as a source of exposure. There is a wide range of exposure because I've not shown you the entire table. We also consider exposure 5 years before birth, exposure 3 years before. So you have this variety of exposure situations examined in a time frame before considered at preconception, that's before birth, pregnancy, and postnatal. This is just to let you know that there's a lot of variety of exposure situations. Oh, all right. Okay, sorry for that. Yeah. Okay. So now, having collected those data, we use again the CMA program, which is just a meta-analysis software, and we use it. Oh yeah, we use that in the program. We calculated or we computed the summary effect size. That is our summary effect. Our effect is the odd ratio, which I show you. The odd ratio between exposed participants and control group, from each paper, and from computed heterogeneity, residential exposure to for 1.2, simply 1.2, and the low, if you consider the group occupational, if you consider the group.
Up to you first. Can you reorient?
By the way, on my this box is square. This square dark, this dark square is the summary effect shown on summary effect or the effect. That's one. So we conclude it is and childhood consider before birth exposure. Exposure. The residential the contact with pesticides, with insecticide, fungicide, there was association. So there wasn't biases in the publication of those studies, plotting this funnel, the of the effect side. That's a log of all ratios. And we check if such papers were omitted. The techniques, that is, papers are distributed. When you look at this paper, so like this one, what is more to check by so the very effect shown by the red diamond, starting with this green in this green box, we have Duval and Tudy, the imputed studies. So we just arrived at, we also check, we use EGAT text, we use for all the categories, there was significant. And when it's not, the bias before birth, the results. So we conclusion that brain tumor. However, by this in the future, could consider more, yes, large cancer, and within home, we need to be more cautious. Pest control treatment.
So there is a specific pediatric society. So on, I would
interesting question. It's a question that people have been asking. The drugs we are using are somehow should be cautious attention when.
Yes.
Well, we're thinking about that. I had a question for you. You able to actually distinguish any particular harms from a specific type?
Categories of specific.
Directly, glyphosate was also one of the major adult cancers, but also to additional other cancers for kids.
Evidence that will help inform us better. So thank you all. Have a great day.